I want to thank Stan Lee and Peter Paul.
If I could turn back time, if I could find a way, I'd take back those words that
It was an extraordinary array of the leadership of the Democratic Party and A-list Hollywood.
I'm a guy who's dealt with superheroes most of my life.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
The new purchasers of Marvel fired Stan. We decided to start our own company, starting with one employee and $500,000 that I put together.
Peter set me free.
Stan Lee, some big announcement he's making about the internet.
Within a year, we had a market cap in excess of $300 million. I decided, well, maybe I should reach out to Bill Clinton to work with us and be a rainmaker for the company when he left the White House.
My first entrepreneurial venture was setting up a comic book stand and used comic books. I had 2 Foot Lockers full of them.
I could accomplish my objective by becoming a major contributor to the party.
I don't know about you, but I've been to 1 or 2 of these events.
It's critical that we all chip in and contribute whatever we can.
We want to thank you, and we're going to be there for you.
That's great.
It was great to see you.
Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
This has nothing to do with campaign contributions at all.
How are you?
Nice to see you again.
I'm very glad to see you again.
And I also want to thank Stan and Joan and Peter and Andrea for their support.
My interest in supporting Hillary Clinton was specifically to hire Bill Clinton.
I'm thrilled. You got me all jazzed up.
And they concocted a big fundraiser for Hillary.
This fundraiser in August 2000 in Los Angeles raised more than $1 million for then Senate candidate Hillary Clinton.
I want to thank Stan Lee and Peter Paul.
I had accomplished hiring a president of the United States to work with me when he left the White House. The Washington Post published the first article
of Peter Paul having a felony record from 2 decades previous.
And that I didn't contribute any money to her campaign, and she vowed she wouldn't take any money from me.
And her representatives, in making these false allegations, were lying on her behalf.
The Clintons now had to pretend that they did not even know who Peter Paul was.
Do you recall Mr. Paul? Do you recall working with him at all?
A few days later, on August 18th, they each sent me handwritten letters which professed our undying friendship, their undying gratitude. A full 2 weeks from the original story in which Hillary vowed never to take money from me, her finance director faxed me a request for $100,000. My reaction to that was, well, why would I send any more money when you vowed not to take any more money from me?
This appears that it was planned all along that they were going to deceive Peter Paul, steal his Japanese business partner, and do damage to his company. Tendo Oto had promised to infuse Stan Lee Media with $5 million in November of 2000. Bill Clinton's business partner, Jim Levin, had flown to Japan, stolen Tendo Oto as a business partner, made his own agreement.
And what he had effectively done was convince Oto, instead of working with the president with me and my company, that he could work directly with the president with Levin. So that began to trigger a meltdown of the stock. The company collapsed as a result. I discovered that in the filings that Hillary's campaign filed with the FEC, they had entirely omitted any reference to any of my contributions.
The Clintons took $2 million from me and hid it.
Now, what we're looking at here is the largest election law fraud in the history of the United States.
and he told the feds that the Clinton campaign lied about it.
Everything. And I delivered a demand letter to Hillary Clinton. We had filed the civil suit against the Clintons, which detailed all the money that I'd spent with copies of checks and invoices. And then I discovered that I was being investigated in connection with the misuse of my brokerage accounts. I was suddenly detained by Interpol in Brazil for extradition. They moved me to a remote part of this jail, which was called the Corridor of Death. The Clintons were able to have the original civil suit thrown out on the basis of that I was a fugitive at the time.
Hillary's skill has been in seeing to it that obvious crimes didn't reach the level of being placed in front of a jury. Because if they ever had, she might have been baking cookies in the same place that Martha Stewart did.
The court held that the case should proceed to trial.
But clearly this could have implications for Mrs. Clinton's political future.
Sure, this could have serious implications not just for her 2006 re-election campaign, but for 2008, where she's the front runner for the presidential nod.
The chief of public integrity finally indicted David Rosen.
The feds charging David Rosen with intentionally understating contributions for a Hollywood fundraising gala.
Hillary Clinton's former chief fundraiser under fire
for allegations of lying about the cost of a fundraiser put together on her behalf.
The judge that officiated over the Rosen trial was appointed by the Clintons.
The judge went out of his way, took every possible effort to make certain that everyone on that jury knew that Hillary Clinton had nothing whatever to do with what Mr. Rosen did. The whole idea was, we have to make sure that Hillary is completely out of this, and we have to make sure that Peter Paul is totally discredited.
Senator Clinton has not been charged in the case.
The media have not abrogated their responsibilities uniquely in the case of Hillary Clinton. They always have a tendency to fear power and to suck up to power.
Hillary Clinton is not in the loop in any direct way.
It would be very difficult to stretch fingerprints to the senator herself.
I'd be amazed if there's any evidence directly.
You're making an accusation. Can you prove it? How can you prove it? What proof do you have?
Hillary Clinton called me in my office in July of 2000, and I started my video camera.
Whatever it is you're doing, is it okay that I thank you?
I think it's tremendous. No, you know what? We're having a good time trying to help out.
Well, I'm very appreciative. It sounds fabulous. I got a full report from Kelly today when she got back and told me everything that you're doing, and it just sounds like it's going to be a great event. But I just wanted to call and personally thank all of you. I'm glad you were all together so that I could tell you how much this means to me, and it's going to mean a lot to the president, too.
First of all, it shows that she had personal involvement and personal knowledge of the details of this gala. You hear her describing how she solicited a contribution by Cher. Therefore, she was soliciting an illegal contribution. So that, too, is a violation of the law. And the FEC law is quite clear. It is a felony, punishable by up to 5 years in jail, for a candidate to be directly involved in this sort of fundraising activity if it exceeds $25,000. And the FEC found that it exceeded $1.2 million. It's crime on tape, very simple.
What we're seeing here is a corruption of the political process, a corruption of the electoral process.
Hillary Clinton and her representatives have been able to squash investigations in all three branches of government.
The corruption just seems to extend to everything.
When citizens truly care about an issue, they sometimes have to put their lives and careers on the line for that issue, and that's what Peter Paul is doing in this case.
People will finally realize the threat posed by Hillary Clinton to this country and the rest of the world.
Breaking tonight, a big story involving Hillary Clinton and a powerful businessman who was funneling millions in donations to her family foundation while possibly violating the U.S. sanctions on Iran. sanctions Mrs. Clinton was supposed to enforce. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. There are serious new questions tonight involving Hillary Clinton and the man seen here, Viktor Pinchuk. Mr. Pinchuk is the fourth richest man in Ukraine, the owner of a massive pipeline company, and reportedly the man who gave more to the Clintons Family Foundation than any other individual. A report now released by Newsweek magazine alleges that Mr. Pinchuk's company may have violated U.S. sanctions on Iran, done business with Iran in 2012 and possibly beyond that year, by delivering nearly $2 million worth of steel pipes to Iran for pipelines. That's a no-no. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State at that time and happened to be the person charged with holding foreign entities responsible for violating U.S. sanctions on Iran. During that same time, between 2009 and 2013, the Clinton Foundation received at least $8.6 million from the Viktor Pinchuk Foundation, and Pinchuk has pledged more than $20 million more and hasn't been charged with violating U.S. sanctions on Iran. We have a big lineup tonight on this. Howie Kurtz is here on the media's handling of this story. It's been ignored entirely. Chris Steyerwalt on the possible political fallout for Mrs. Clinton. And the Wall Street Journal's Brett Stevens is here. But we begin with Trace Gallagher, who has more on Mr. Pinchuk and the story. Trace?
And Megyn, make no mistake, the Interpipe Group is a major global player when it comes to manufacturing steel pipes, including those used in gas and oil distribution. The company, as you said, owned by 54-year-old Viktor Pinchuk, the fourth richest man in Ukraine, the largest individual donor to the Clinton Foundation. Pinchuk has known the Clintons for 9 years and has reportedly become very close friends with Bill Clinton. Viktor Pinchuk is also the son-in-law of a former Ukrainian president who the New York Times says was accused of corruption, nepotism, and murdering journalists. The former president also sold a state-owned steel company to his son-in-law for what critics say was pennies on the dollar. Now, back in November, former Congressman Republican Steve Stockman raised a red flag with the U.S. Treasury Department over Interpipe's dealings with Iran. Stockman was concerned that Interpipe was circumventing U.S. sanctions that prohibit any single invoice of more than $1 million to Iran's oil and gas industry. Newsweek now claims it has documentation that confirms a series of shipments from Interpipe to Iran in 2011 and 2012 with invoices totaling millions of dollars. Now, some argue that U.S. sanction laws are not well defined and that Interpipe may not be in violation, but Interpipe also has a subsidiary right here in the U.S., and that alone might qualify the company for crippling penalties like denying it access to both the U.S. market and U.S. banks. Back in 2012, a Chinese oil company with no U.S. base of operations was penalized for ignoring U.S. foreign policy. Of course, the State Department is in charge of policing the list of foreign companies, and at the time, the head of the State Department was, of course, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Interpipe has responded to Newsweek's story, calling it inaccurate and potentially libelous, saying, quoting here, Interpipe has complied with the sanctions to the letter. Any allegation to the contrary is completely wrong. The alleged evidence of alleged violations is either falsified or the authors have been misled in the interpretation. Experts say, violation or not, this is why even some Clinton supporters believe taking donations from foreign companies is a bad idea. Megyn.
Trace, thank you. Joining us now with more, Brett Stevens, a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and author of America in Retreat, The New Isolationism and the Coming Global Disorder. Brett, good to see you. So this is a significant story that right now is on Newsweek. They posted it on Saturday. And this is as close as we've seen so far to a direct suggestion of a this for that deal, where this guy made millions in donations to the Clinton Foundation, and according to this former congressman and according to Newsweek, which claims to have seen the documents, he was providing oil supplies basically to Iran, which is a no-no under U.S. sanctions, and faced no penalty, which he denies, but Newsweek and this former congressman seem to think he did.
Well, look, this is To me, this is just an emblematic story about the way the Clintons do business, the way they've done business for a long time, since their days in Arkansas, all the way into the present. Look, if Hillary Clinton has a theme song for her campaign, it should be Blurred Lines. Because here we see a perfect example of the blurring of her functions as Secretary of State, as a political figure, as a person with responsibility over a major philanthropy, and then in terms of her private interests. I was at a conference in Ukraine just a couple of years ago, sponsored by Mr. Pinchuk, and who, of course, were the star guests, the guests of honor, Bill and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton gave.
They're very tight. Bill Clinton is among his close friends. Bill Clinton went to his birthday party, his 55th birthday party. I think it was
his 50th birthday when he flew in Cirque du Soleil into a town in France.
That's nothing. I did that for my last birthday too. But and then he went to Bill Clinton's 65th birthday party. I mean, they're tight, and this guy's given so much money, millions of dollars, and I think 65% of the millions that he's given was given to the Clinton Foundation during the years that Hillary was Secretary of State, which raises. It just underscores the problems that she is going to face if we have a diligent press corps in taking a hard look at what she did or didn't do for those companies while she was secretary.
Right, and I think that it's going to be very difficult to prove anything one way or the other. It is true that sanctions laws can often be very imprecisely drawn. It's not clear precisely what's under sanction. But it gets to the point that the Clintons inhabit this area between outright corruption and actual ethical conduct, and that's the world of sleaze. That's the world of connections. That's the world in which people have access to the Clintons or are somehow buying access to the Clintons. I mean, to give you an example, the New York Times last year took note that Chelsea Clinton gets about $75,000 or as much as $75,000 a speech for speaking on subjects like diarrhea, which is a subject she says she's passionate about.
Well, in the third world, she's talking about kids dying from
I understand that, but why do people pay that kind of money? Why do people want the Clintons at their...
it's not just to meet Chelsea Clinton?
I suspect it's not to learn more about diarrhea as a scourge in the third world.
It's to have access and to be able, and that's what this guy has with Bill Clinton. I mean, just sitting next to him gives him legitimacy.
Right, and even if the behavior of the Clintons is above board, you have to ask, well, who else then has access? Who's invited to the party? What favors are being done by saying, come to a certain conference where Bill and Hillary Clinton are going to be present? And that's why this whole philanthropic sort of empire that the Clintons have assembled between the foundation, global initiative, and so on, I think is so toxic and tells you so much about the way the Clintons have always operated. If you like what you're seeing now, we're going to hear about it more and more throughout the campaign, and if she's elected through her presidency.
And the question remains, to whom does she owe favors because of the Clinton Foundation? Brett, good to see you.
Good to be here.
Joining us now with more, Fox News digital politics editor Chris Steyerwalt. So, how bad, if at all, is this?
Well, look, perhaps it is true that Pinchuk and others who have unsavory associations, or these people who are not exactly the kind of folks that Mr. and Mrs. America want to see hanging around with their future president, maybe these people are all fools. Maybe they give all this money for nothing. Maybe they, instead of giving it to the Red Cross or some other charitable place, they give it to the Clintons in hopes of access, and they never get any. But that's billions of dollars worth of mistakes that people have been making over the years. Mm-hmm. And for Hillary Clinton, here's the deal. You remember Mark Rich? Remember what he was in trouble for? He got a pardon from Bill Clinton in the flurry of activity at the closing days of the Clinton presidency. He got a pardon because he was on the lam in Europe for violating rules for trading with Iran. It was so serious that he was trafficking in oil with them, that it was so serious he was facing enormous penalties, big enough that he fled to Europe and stayed there, and then somehow, magically, at the end of the Clinton presidency, got a very nice pardon deal.
Mm-hmm. A deal pushed by Eric Holder.
Well, yes, a deal ratified. Eric Holder checked off on it at the end, which I'm sure he has regretted to this day. The deal for the Clintons politically on this is, as Brett said, as you point out, the baggage builds up over time, and people just get to the point where you throw up your hands and you say, can we please stop with the one after the next after the other, and the long list of association, it accretes to them, and people become fatigued by thinking about, as you say, is this really what you want to live through for the next 8 years.
Well, what about the fact that, if this in fact happened, I mean, right, if Newsweek is right and this former Congressman Stockman is right, that the Clinton Foundation took the money and did not enforce the sanctions law against the guy who donated the money, because, I mean, the guy who was, giving money to Iran also gave money to, or selling to Iran, also gave money to the Clintons. And if they're right that Mrs. Clinton looked the other way because he was making the donations to her foundation, the Democrats are not going to be happy. I mean, aside from the ethical issues, that's a direct undermining of President Obama's policies, the sanctions he put in place, helped put in place.
And that's the key. This is not a story about Republicans don't like Hillary Clinton and here they go again. This is Hillary Clinton undermining what is the cornerstone foreign policy initiative of President Obama. That's the allegation against her. That's the claim in this Newsweek article, is that Hillary Clinton was either by inference or action, if you want to take the claim to the next level, inference or action, undermining the president's policy on Iran and making the situation weaker. This does not sound like a good time to throw into question how well the sanctions were enforced, just as the president's trying to get them lifted, saying that they've been effective and they worked.
Chris, it's good to see you. I want to underscore to the viewers again, as Trace reported, that this company, Interpipe, Pinchuk's company, again comes out and says this Newsweek report is inaccurate. They say it's potentially libelous, although Newsweek reported that when they reached out to Interpipe for comment, they did not respond to requests for comment on it. Now, after the fact, after it comes out, they come out and say, we haven't violated the sanctions, and this is a potentially libelous piece. We'll continue to follow up on this. We ourselves are searching for the underlying documentation and hope to have a follow-up report for you on this tomorrow night. Well, Newsweek first reported this story 4 days ago. So why are we just seeing the details on this now? Do you think if this kind of report hit in a publication like Newsweek about a Republican, it would have been totally ignored for 4 days? Howie Kurtz is next on how the media is handling this one and why. Plus, big news tonight.